What's up, everyone? Tiger Stacker here. Welcome back to part 2. Let's return to Delegate Chris Pritt about gold and silver being recognized as money with Bill 4342.
An appropriate amount to be offered in terms of whatever business they're transacting. So it's written in such a way that we don't really get into a whole lot of specificity. But if the more you get, I think that one could make the case that to the extent that you got into more specificity, you could actually be at that point infringing on the liberty interests of those who are transacting business. So it's broadly written in such a way that whoever is dealing with in the gold and the silver coin, and who the parties that are transacting the business, it's really up to them to decide whether a certain amount is appropriate.
So there's room in the bill to allow the buyer and the seller to negotiate the worth of the metal.
That's right. It would be up to them. It's broadly written in a way that it would be up to the individuals who are transacting business to come up with what they think is the appropriate amount.
Okay. When you say coin, that's going to, if it's strictly using the word coin in the language, it will limit whether or not someone could use bullion, because if it strictly says coin, then you would have a potential issue versus allowing for bullion, or whether it be coin or bar or round.
And I don't have necessarily any kind of issue with if we were to expand that into, for example, gold bullion bars or anything else for that matter. I mean, I don't have a philosophical opposition to that. It just, the idea here is trying to get something passed and something that would make sense to, for example, a bunch of legislators who were, I mean, look, we're dealing with citizen legislators. These are people who for 60 days out of the year go to the legislature to vote on bills. You have individuals from all sorts of backgrounds. You have individuals with just high school diplomas. You have lawyers, you have doctors, you have business owners, you have people who are bus drivers and people who work in coal mines. I mean, you have people across the board. And so one of the things that you have to do, I think, when crafting legislation is to at least start somewhere that's going to make sense to an everyday person. Okay. One of the things that when it comes to state legislatures across the country, not just West Virginia, but across the country, a lot of times these are just people who most of the time go back to their normal life and their normal jobs. This is not something that they do full time. And so this is where we decided to start, is with a gold and silver coin. And then perhaps if we can pass this, then we can expand from there in the future.
Okay. So that takes care of a lot of my other questions. So the limitation might get expanded, or it might not be so detailed enough that it needs to go further than to allow the seller and the buyer to agree upon a agreed upon amount. One of my concerns was this going to be limited to American minted products such as the American Silver Eagle, American Gold Eagle, American Buffalo, or would it involve constitutional silvers, which is a couple of things I showed you here, which obviously has an issue between face value and real value, but also even the Silver Eagle is labeled as $1, but it's going nowadays for about $28 plus or minus. Then you got, on the topic of gold, you have your gold bullion, which is your, if you're dealing with only American, you got the American Gold Eagle, the American Gold Buffalo. But then you got your pre-33s, which is the coins that were made prior to 1933, when FDR passed the executive order to confiscate gold. But then there's topics about slabbed and unslabbed, which I'm sure I can teach you about if you ever ask. One of the things I also want to point out is the gold back. Okay, Now, depending on which state, this one here from Nevada says voluntary local currency. And I forget which state it says, but it'll say voluntary coin or something like that. It will actually use the word coin, even though it's rectangular. And for those of you who are watching this type of product for the first time, this is actually deposits of gold on a polymer with a picture on it, and then covered again with a polymer on the back. This is 1/1000th of a troy ounce, and they come in fungible denominations, such as if you had 5 1 gold backs, you could exchange it for a 5 gold back because it's the exact same amount of weight. What I want to point to you, Mr. Pritt, is if we go this route, and now that I'm showing you what these products are, would it be possible to have you in the legislature consider looking at these products as a form of fungible type of gold to be used in West Virginia, where the company that makes them for the 5 states, which are Nevada, Utah, Nevada, New Hampshire, Wyoming, and most recently South Dakota, they would make up the same types of fungible products with West Virginia. That might be something that the legislature would consider in the future. I know this is a new topic for you, so I just thought I'd just introduce it to you, even though you may or may not know how to respond at this moment, but it's something to consider. So I'll let you respond.
On its face, I think it sounds like a great idea. I mean, any way that we can introduce alternative forms of tender, I think that's certainly a great thing. This is my first time seeing those, but that would be something that I would certainly be a big advocate for if we could get that through the legislature. One of the things I would like to do, though, I would just say this, is to get the ball rolling on something. For strategic reasons, I think it might be a good idea to start somewhere with the bill as it is, because I'll just tell you, getting any kind of bill through any legislative body is incredibly difficult. I mean, whether it's this bill, whether it's anything. I mean, even if there's, for example, a super majority of Republicans like we have in West Virginia, it's difficult to get a bill through. You have to get several individuals to buy in. Not only do you have to have a majority of the individuals in both the House and the Senate to be on board with the bill. Typically what happens is a bill gets assigned to a committee once it's introduced, and that if the chair of that committee does not want to run the bill, it's going to die there. So there's all sorts of of course, the legislative leadership, whether it's the majority leader, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate President, and the majority leader in the Senate. You have to get buy-in from multiple individuals to get a bill through the legislature, because there are key individuals who can completely put a stop to anything you want to pass. And of course, after that, once it makes through the legislative process, then it has to be approved by the governor. And then even after that, if somebody has an issue with some legislation, not necessarily in this case, but in other cases, somebody might challenge a statute on constitutional grounds. So that's one of the things that I think is very, very key when it comes to any kind of proposed legislation, is you have to start at a point where you think you can get something passed. Even if, and a lot of times what I'll do is I will introduce bills that I think are purely aspirational, and I'll also introduce one that I think is more likely to pass. And at any point in the process too, if for example, somebody is really compelled to do so, there can always be an amendment. So for example, this bill that I proposed, at any point in the process, if we believe that there would be some support for adding on other things like you're discussing right now, that could be potentially amended into the bill at any stage. So that's something that certainly I would be in favor of doing if there would be the support in the legislature.
I see where you're coming from. It does sound like a very complicated, lengthy process.
Yes.
And it sounds like it's one of those situations, whether it's your bill or something totally different, that any hiccup can kill it.
It can, absolutely it can. It can be very, very challenging getting anything through any legislative body. But I think one of the things it's actually a good thing in the sense that we don't want a government where it's easy to act, okay, to do anything. I mean, I think it's a positive thing. A lot of people will complain about the fact that, in these other countries, it's so easy to get anything passed. And that may be true, for example, like a parliamentary system, like over in the United Kingdom. Yes, it is very easy to get things passed in other bodies. But at the same time, one of the great things about our country is the fact that it is difficult to get things through. Okay, so because of the fact that it's not easy to get things through means that our liberties are less likely to be infringed upon. And I see that happen a lot as bills are pushed through the legislature where there is an attempt to in some way infringe upon the liberty interest of the citizenry. And a lot of times because of that, we can put a stop to bills. So on the one hand, yes, it can be frustrating. On the other hand, it's a good thing. I mean, it's a good thing that we have a federal government that is supposed to have distinct powers from the states that are supposed to have distinct powers, and that the two are considered to be what we call separate sovereigns. I mean, the federal government is a separate sovereign than the state of West Virginia, and we're supposed to be a co-equal sovereign, which each of those two having separate powers.